For years, audiences believed they knew the full story of Nancy Guthrie. They saw the confident Bible teacher, the calm voice on stage, the woman who spoke about suffering with unusual clarity and steady faith. They heard her talk about loss, about trust, about hope that survives the darkest nights. But what if the most powerful of her story wasn't the one told under bright lights? What if behind the microphone and the applause was a chapter of pain so raw, so personal, that even she struggled to say it out loud? There was a season when silence felt safer than explanation, when smiling for the audience was easier than admitting how deep the wounds truly went. Friends noticed the strength. Admirers praised her courage. Yet very few understood the private wrestling, the questions whispered in the dark, the moments when faith didn't feel triumphant but trembling. Now, as more of her journey comes into focus, the truth is not scandalous or sensational. It is something far more human. It is the story of a woman whose greatest message was born not from a stage, but from a hospital room, a quiet home, and a heart that refused to give up. Long before conferences, books, and international audiences, Nancy's life looked beautifully ordinary. She was a wife, a mother, and a woman deeply rooted in her faith community. Her days were filled with the familiar rhythms of family life. There were meals to prepare, conversations around the dinner table, and dreams about the future. From the outside, everything appeared steady and secure. She believed in a God who was good, sovereign, and loving. She taught others about trust. She spoke about hope as something solid and dependable. Then came the diagnosis that changed everything. Her daughter was born with a rare metabolic disorder, a condition that doctors explained carefully but could not cure. The medical terminology was complex, but the meaning was painfully simple. Her child would not live a long life. In an instant, the world she had built around expectations and plans began to shift. The prayers she once prayed confidently now felt desperate. Instead of asking for guidance in ministry or wisdom in parenting, she found herself pleading for breath, for strength, for just one more day. The early months were filled with hospital visits and quiet fear. Machines beeped in sterile rooms. Doctors spoke in measured tones. Friends offered casseroles and kind words. Yet none of it erased the reality that she was walking a road she would never have chosen. And here is where the secret truly began, not something shameful, but something deeply misunderstood. Nancy was not always strong. She was not always composed. There were nights when exhaustion drowned out eloquence. There were moments when she asked questions she never imagined she would voice. Why this child? Why this pain? Why a story that seemed to contradict everything she believed about blessing and protection? After her daughter passed away, grief settled into the house like an uninvited guest. Silence felt heavier than sound. Toys remained where they had been left. Clothing still carried the faint scent of a life now gone. Many expected her to immediately transform tragedy into testimony. But healing did not arrive overnight. Faith did not erase heartbreak. Instead, she discovered that real trust is forged in the tension between belief and bewilderment. Years later, heartbreak struck again. A second daughter was born with the same devastating condition. Hope rose cautiously, only to be tested once more. Walking that path a second time was not easier. In some ways, it was even more painful because she knew exactly what lay ahead. She knew the hospital corridors. She knew the look in the doctor's eyes. She knew the inevitable goodbye. What few people realized was how deeply this repetition affected her. Publicly, she spoke about hope. Privately, she battled the quiet fear of loving and losing all over again. It is one thing to endure suffering once. It is another to step into it knowingly. Yet through that journey, something inside her began to change. Her faith was no longer theoretical. It was no longer built on outcomes. It became anchored in something steadier than circumstances. The truth she once struggled to articulate was this: faith is not proven by escaping pain, but by clinging to God in the middle of it. And that truth was not polished in a studio or crafted for a platform. It was carved into her heart through tears. As time passed, many people encountered Nancy through her teaching and writing. They heard wisdom that felt seasoned, compassionate, and unusually honest. She did not speak as someone who had read about suffering. She spoke as someone who had buried children. That distinction changed everything. But here is what remained hidden for a long time: the cost of becoming that voice. Grief does not disappear simply because one learns how to talk about it. Anniversaries still arrive. Certain songs still trigger memories. Seeing other families with grown daughters can reopen quiet wounds. There is a particular ache reserved for milestones that will never be reached: graduations, weddings, grandchildren. Nancy carried those invisible absences with her into every room. Some assumed that because she spoke about hope, she must have resolved all her questions. The reality was more complex. Faith matured, yes. Trust deepened, certainly. But longing remained. She had to learn how to live with both gratitude and grief existing in the same heart. That balance became one of the most powerful yet least understood aspects of her story. There were invitations to speak at large gatherings. There were book contracts and interviews. With each opportunity came a choice. How much should she reveal? How vulnerable should she be? Early on, it was tempting to tidy the story, to present a version that felt encouraging without exposing the raw edges. After all, audiences prefer resolution. They want assurance that everything works out neatly. But her life did not follow a neat script. Gradually, she began to share not only the triumphs of faith, but the tremors beneath it. She spoke about sitting in hospital rooms unsure of what to pray. She admitted that sometimes trust meant simply getting out of bed. That honesty resonated with people who were tired of polished answers. They did not need cliches. They needed someone who understood. The secret many believed she was hiding was not scandal. It was vulnerability. For a season, she protected parts of her pain because it felt too sacred, too personal to broadcast. She did not want her daughters' lives reduced to illustrations. They were not sermon material. They were beloved children. Learning how to honor their memory while helping others required careful discernment. Behind the scenes, she and her husband navigated grief together, sometimes in sync, sometimes differently. Loss can either fracture a marriage or deepen it. For them, it became a refining fire. They had to communicate through sorrow, to give one another space to mourn uniquely. Those quiet acts of patience and persistence formed the unseen foundation beneath her. Public ministry. People often ask how she maintained hope. The answer is less dramatic than one might expect. It was built through daily practices: reading scripture when it felt dry, praying when words seemed thin, choosing gratitude even when it coexisted with ache. Over time, these small decisions accumulated into resilience. What the world sees now is the fruit of those hidden years. But fruit grows from roots that stretch deep into dark soil. And Nancy's roots were strengthened not in applause, but in unanswered prayers. There is a particular weight that comes with becoming known for suffering. When audiences look at Nancy, they see someone who handles pain well. They see composure. They see perspective. Yet being placed on that pedestal can feel isolating. It creates pressure to remain strong even on days when strength feels scarce. At conferences, people line up to share their stories. They speak of cancer diagnoses, broken marriages, prodigal children. Many end their stories with the same phrase: "I don't know how you survived what you did." Nancy listens, empathizes, and gently points them toward hope. But inside, she knows survival is not a one-time achievement. It is ongoing. There are still mornings when memories surface unexpectedly. The sound of a lullaby. The sight of a tiny dress in a store window. Grief evolves, but it never completely disappears. It softens around the edges, yet remains a permanent thread woven into the fabric of her life. One of the most profound shifts in her journey was redefining what it means to be blessed. Before loss, blessing might have meant health, stability, and visible success. After loss, blessing became the presence of God in hospital rooms, the kindness of friends who showed up, the assurance that her daughters' lives, though brief, had eternal significance. This redefinition did not minimize the pain. It reframed it. Another hidden struggle was learning to accept joy again. For grieving parents, happiness can feel disloyal. Smiling may seem like forgetting. Nancy had to give herself permission to laugh, to celebrate, to embrace new seasons without guilt. That process required courage. It meant believing that honoring the past did not require remaining trapped in it. Her ministry eventually expanded beyond what she once imagined. Invitations multiplied. Her voice reached people she would never meet in person. Yet she remained careful not to build an identity solely around tragedy. She is more than her losses. She is a woman who loves, learns, teaches, and continues to grow. The truth now exposed is not that she hid something dark. It is that she carried something sacred. She protected the depth of her grief until she could share it in a way that served others, rather than simply satisfying curiosity. In a culture that often demands instant transparency, her patience stands out by allowing time to mature her story. She ensured that when she spoke, her words carried weight. They were not rushed. They were refined. Today, when people look at Nancy's life, they see a narrative shaped by loss, but not defined by it. The secret that once seemed buried has become the cornerstone of her message. Suffering does not signal the absence of God. It can, paradoxically, reveal his nearness in ways comfort never could. She no longer feels the same pressure to guard her story. With time has come clarity. She understands that sharing her journey does not exploit her daughter's memory. It honors it. Their short lives continue to ripple outward, touching hearts across generations. That realization transformed her perspective from one of mere endurance to purposeful testimony. There is still tenderness when she speaks their names. There are still pauses when emotion rises unexpectedly. But those pauses are not signs of weakness. They are reminders that love does not end. And perhaps that is the most powerful truth of all. Many people expected a dramatic revelation when whispers circulated about what she had tried to bury. Instead, what emerged was something profoundly human. A mother's grief, a believer's questions, a woman's gradual rebuilding of trust. It is not the kind of story that thrives on scandal. It thrives on sincerity. Her journey teaches that faith is not a shield against heartbreak. It is an anchor within it. It does not guarantee outcomes. It guarantees presence. That distinction reshaped her life and, through her, the lives of countless others. Looking back, she can see that the years of quiet wrestling were not wasted. They prepared her to sit with others in their darkest moments without offering shallow answers. They gave her empathy that cannot be taught in classrooms. They grounded her hope in something sturdier than circumstances. In the end, the so-called secret was never about hiding wrongdoing. It was about protecting something precious until the time was right. Now, as her full story stands in the open, it carries a message far deeper than curiosity ever could. Pain did not destroy her faith. It refined it. Loss did not silence her voice. It gave it resonance. And the truth that has finally come into view is simple yet profound. Sometimes the most powerful stories are not the ones shouted from stages, but the ones whispered through tears and lived faithfully day after day.